Welcome to Learn from Others, show number 2.
This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guests on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Welcome to Learn from Others. This is Greg Stanley, and I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Beth Jarocki. Beth, thank you for taking us on your career journey today. And before we find out what you are doing, can you tell us what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, hello, Greg. Yes, I always wanted to be a truck driver, and that is not what I ended up being.
A truck driver, really? Why did you want to be a truck driver? That's awesome.
Well, I'm 5 feet tall, and I've been the littlest one in class my whole life, and I think it was my way of dreaming big. I wanted something big and powerful that I could be in control of, and to me that was an 18-wheel truck. So
that's awesome. I would have never guessed that. That is great.
Yeah, I used to have dreams that, all the time, these recurring dreams of me driving this 18-wheel truck.
So have you ever driven a big 18-wheel truck?
No, but I joke that might be my retirement plan.
Wow. Okay. I like that. What about construction vehicles? Do you want to drive a front-end loader or anything like that too?
No. No, not so much.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you want to be a truck driver. Well, what was your first job? And that could be anything from babysitting to, walking dogs or whatever. Doesn't have to be one with a paycheck.
My first job, I was a paper girl. I had a paper route. I was 11 years old. We lived in a small town in southern Illinois, and it was a lot of responsibility. I don't think they really have that for kids anymore, but it was great because you were responsible for making sure the deliveries happened by a specific time, and then you had to go back and collect the money for the newspaper subscription.
Wow.
And turn that in. So it was a great opportunity and taught me a lot of responsibility early in life.
So was that like riding a bike and chunking the papers towards? Really? Okay.
I had a little basket, and I had all my newspapers in the basket, and it was just, the little town paper.
That's awesome. Did you ever have to strong arm anyone to get their money, or, were they just...
Yeah, I had to go back lots of times to certain houses. I got bit by a dog once. And I had an older gentleman who was really sweet, and he would give me these amazing gifts that he would make, and he made me like a buffalo nickel necklace once where he cut it all out. That's the one I remember, and would always give me words of wisdom, and he was probably my first mentor thinking back on it.
That's awesome. Wow. So, yeah, that has to be a little tough being someone who's not paying their newspaper bill and a little, 5 foot. I don't know if you were 5 feet tall at the time, a little 11-year-old.
I would not have been, no.
Coming up to you to get the money from you. Wow. Well, that's really cool. Well, okay, so that was probably also your first real job, too.
Yeah, it was probably my first real job, although the one that I think of as my first real job that kind of led to shaping my future was I went to college for a marketing job. I went to school for marketing, and I got out of college and got my first marketing job and hated it.
Wow. And
realized, boy, I made a huge mistake. So I quit without another job.
Wow.
And that's what led me to sales. I ended up having to be a secretary in a sales office because I couldn't find another job. And my boss at the time said, boy, you're really good with customers on the phone. You should consider going into sales. And I didn't know what sales was. I thought it was, cold calling and calling people up and having them hang up on you. I didn't know what sales meant. And that's what led me to my, now 30 years later, my sales career.
So speaking of which, what do you do today? What is your day in, day out job?
So today I am a vice president of sales for a company that sells consumer products. So when you think about going to the grocery store or the store to buy something and it's on the shelf, I'm the head of sales for one of those companies.
So what does a typical day look, and what are you coordinating from a daily perspective?
Well, every day's a little bit different, but my responsibilities are things like managing people on the team and making sure they have a clear idea of what they need to get done, helping them get resources to get their job done, whether that's money or
tools or
signage in the store or whatever it might be. And then I have to make sure that we have very clear selling objectives, like how much do we want to sell by what period of time. And then I spend a lot of time measuring and monitoring that with reports. And then talking to people and helping them if they're not meeting their goals, to find a way to meet their goals. And then on the other side, if they're exceeding their goals, how can they maybe take that idea and help other people? So that's
Right.
a lot of what I do every day.
Right. So speaking of that, what is one of the more challenging things about your job? And then on the flip side, which I think we just touched on, one of the more rewarding aspects of your job?
Yeah, definitely the rewarding part is the working with people. That's my favorite thing. I would say the most challenging is sometimes the customers that we call on can be really challenging because they might not necessarily want the products or might not want to be giving us the same stuff that we want. Like we might want more space on the shelf and they maybe don't want to give it to us. And every customer is different, so they may not necessarily respond to a good logical argument. They might be emotional, and they might just not have a reason for why they're saying no. So that's probably the most difficult, I would say, part of the job.
Right. Yeah. So you tell them all the reasons they need that item, and it makes the most sense in the world from every perspective, and they still don't want it. That's got to be. I know that from personal experience. That's frustrating. So.
Yes.
Well, how does this job align with your strengths and your interests?
Well, I would say, I have a unique ability to understand people at their level. And what that means is I understand that everyone is uniquely different. And I really love being able to put people in the right place that gets to use their strengths. And so because I have that ability, I think the part that I get to use every day is I have a team of people. And so I get to orchestrate where they go and what they get to work on and put them in a situation where they get to use their strengths all the time. And so that's something that really aligns with what I do well.
Yeah, that's great. And that's one of the best strengths to have when you're trying to build a team, obviously, because if someone's misplaced in their role, they're not going to be as successful as if they're in the right role. So that's awesome. Well,
because you can imagine, like, all of us have been in situations where we were trying our best, but we weren't really doing a very good job, and we knew it, and it didn't make us feel very good. And then you get into another opportunity where you get to do the things that you're really good at, and you realize that you enjoy that a lot more. And so I'd like being able to provide that to people, put them in a situation where they get to do a really good job at something.
Right, and they'll provide fruit just based because they're happy and they're productive, and it plays towards their strengths, and so their productivity will be much greater. It's a win-win. Well, that's great. Well, before we move on to our next question, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Do you enjoy your job and find it fulfilling? Or do you spend more time wondering what if instead of what's next? If so, contact Career Spa. Career Spa has extensive programs and curriculum and understands the challenges faced by individuals in transition. They can teach these success practices to be mastered for an effective job search. Answer that what if question by contacting Career Spa and asking their experts, what's next? Contact Career Spa at careerspa.net. Talent acquisition is key to building a successful organization. Talent Connections is a professional services firm that specializes in recruiting, including executive search, contract recruiting, talent acquisition consulting, and recruitment process outsourcing. Whether you are an individual or a Fortune 100 company, Talent Connections can connect you with success. Contact them at talentconnections.net. Welcome back. We just learned what you wanted to be when you grew up, and now you've told us what you do today. So if you could do it all over again, is there anything you would do differently? Different education or experience, a different vocation, anything at all?
I've learned I really like sales because, as I mentioned earlier, I like people, and that is probably the number one most important feature in being in a sales role, because you work with people all day long and you get to interact with them. So I don't know that I would have done anything differently in terms of a career or preparing for this career. And I think probably what I would have done is maybe started earlier. If I had known more about what sales people did, I probably would have started this earlier and not tried to go into a role that wasn't a good fit for me.
Okay, and that's a great lead-in to if someone does want to get into sales, whether it's a VP of sales or just a sales manager, what advice would you give them? Is there a typical career path? Is there a particular school you recommend? Any advice you would give?
Yeah, I think the first thing is really understanding the different types of sales roles, because I work in a business where it's about building a relationship with customers and building trust with those customers and delivering products to them on a regular basis. And that's a very different type of sales job than someone who is just calling someone and that doesn't know who they are and needs to sell them something, like somebody who knocks on your door or somebody calls you out of the blue and tries to sell you something. So those are very different roles, and there's lots of different types of sales roles. So I think if I were giving anyone advice, it's to understand what type of sales roles are out there and what are your own personal strengths. So where would you be a good fit for that? So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Okay. And what's the best career advice someone has ever given you?
The best career advice is, again, putting yourself in a situation where you get to use your strengths.
Right.
And sometimes it takes a lot of trial and error. You may get into a situation and you think it's going to be a good fit for you, and it's not. And I remember very early in one of my very first jobs, I called my father, who is a coach. He's a professional coach. And he said to me, his advice was, look, you're not happy there because those people value something very different than what you're good at. The way to be happy in a career is to find a situation where the things that you're good at are the things that are important for success in that job. And that was the best advice I've ever gotten. And to this day, whenever I change jobs, I spend a lot of time understanding the company culture and the people I'm going to be working with and what's important to them to make sure it's going to be a good fit.
Right. No, that's great. That's great advice. Now, you mentioned earlier on your bike route that one of your customers who gave you the Buffalo Nickels might have been one of your first mentors. So have you had mentors since then? And if so, how did they influence your career?
Yeah, I have had them. And what's interesting is a lot of times you'll hear that term mentor and you'll think it's a big formal relationship that, someone's got to ask, like a date, someone's got to ask you out. And, the most valuable mentoring relationships I've had have been the ones where I just clicked with someone personally, and they were in a situation where they could give me advice, and I would reach out to them naturally and say, hey, I got this situation, I want to run it past you. What would you do? What advice would you give me? And stayed in contact with those people. And to this day, I have a network of people that I've worked with and known, for 30 years, some less time than that, but people that I reach out to on a regular basis, if nothing else, just to catch up. And I think that is probably what I value the most about the mentoring relationship, but it also is building a network beyond just mentoring. People may start as a mentor and then they end up just being a friend of mine, a colleague.
Right. Yes. I know a lot of the mentorships come through organically. Like you said, it's someone that you click with and, they start investing in you and you don't even realize it. Just one of those things you need to recognize and, start asking questions and get some advice. Mm-hmm. That's really great. Well, as with most journeys, success largely depends on reliable transportation. And since I'm a huge car fan, could you tell us what was your first car ever?
My first car was the first car that I bought was a Volkswagen Jetta diesel.
Nice.
Back in the day when gas wasn't even that expensive, I was getting 55 miles to the gallon.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Sure. Wow, that's a good little car. Those are cool little cars, the little diesels. Well, yep. Do you have a dream car, or what is your dream car?
Well, I don't have a dream car, but I definitely like the luxury vehicles, the Lexus, different series, the high-end Audis. That's kind of my thing. Even a nice, beautiful, brand new Cadillac is right up my alley. Oh,
that's cool. Well, one of the great perks to some jobs is a company car. So I'd like to recommend a really cool company car for you based on your position. And I probably put a lot more, thought into this than I really needed to. So the one I'm recommending for you, and this is the first one that I've recommended that's not an old car, is a 2012 Lexus LFA. Have you ever heard of the Lexus LFA? I got the Lexus right.
I have not. Yeah, so, I don't know that one.
Okay. Well, it's their supercar. They only made 500 of them. So my thought is, as VP of sales, it's performance based. You got to work fast. Everything's within your reach, your team, your resources. And that's kind of the way the LFA is. So it's a crazy fast supercar. 500 of them were made. The engine was so special. The person who put it together, it was engraved their signature. And they weren't cheap. They were about $400,000 new, and they're worth about $1 million now. So if I had all the money in the world, I could buy you a company car. I would buy you a 2012, and a 2012 because that's the last year they made them. So it's the newest one of those. So
I would be very grateful for a company car like that.
You could get to work quickly in the Chicago traffic.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Beth, so much for taking us on your career journey today. What's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you or your company?
Well, I have a LinkedIn page. That's the best way to learn more about me is go out to LinkedIn and look up Beth Jarocki at Bayer, Bayer, and you will see my background.
All right. Thanks so much, Beth.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.